Thank you for joining us for 5 tips for digital photography, learning to shoot like a pro. As a budding photographer, we need to learn to identify what makes a great photo and even what makes a bad one too. So today we're going to talk about 5 main tips, main areas that you can become familiar with to become a better photographer, regardless of how much experience you have as a photographer, whether you're a beginner or you've been shooting for a while. I think you're going to be able to grab something from this webinar that's going to help you, and you're going to be able to see almost immediate results. So again, thank you for joining us today for 5 tips for better photography. And let's get started now. This is the cover. Utilizes a lot of these main areas that we're going to talk about. It's just a beautiful view of Orange County, California, overlooking John Wayne Airport from a high-rise project that I was photographing. So let's move on now. Our first area that I would like to talk about today is light and how important light is. A lot of times we don't really notice the light itself. We notice the things that it's illuminating. And so one of my first challenges that when I come into classes is that we need to identify the light, especially light has direction. You know, we look up at the sun, it's 93 million miles away. It's coming from a source. And so if there's no clouds or anything in the way or building, we see the direction that the light's coming from, whether it's low in the sky, high in the sky, or late in the afternoon. There's a certain direction. So we're going to talk about 3 main directions that light comes from today. The first would be front lighting. That's where the camera/photographer is in between the subject and the light source. Not so close that you cast a shadow. That would be an eclipse, and that would be bad. But here we have front illumination that's falling on our subject almost completely straight on. There's very little shadows anywhere. There's a slight shadow if you look at the upper right-hand area of her forehead. And when I talk about pictures today, we're going to identify it by camera right and camera left, not the subjects, because that gets all mixed up, and we want to make it as clear as possible. So this is known as front lighting. Let's move on to our next example, which would be side lighting. And side lighting is just that. It's light that's coming from the side. In this example, we are in a large building, a foyer area. There's a bank of windows to camera right, and it's coming sideways from right to left. We can see the model, the subject's face is illuminated, and that there's a slight shadow behind her from that light source. Side lighting, there's a lot of different variations of it. Obviously, it could come from the left or the right, different heights, but basically when it all comes down to it, it's side lighting. It's coming from the side. Very, very good lighting, depending on the quality of it, and which is something that we'll move on to in a minute. But it's a good light source, a good direction to photograph people from. That brings us to our next area of lighting, and that is backlighting. Now, backlighting is where obviously the brightest source of the light is coming from behind the subject, and what happens a lot here is we end up getting silhouettes. Now, this picture here is a perfect example of what happens to a lot of amateur photographers, and sometimes more seasoned photographers who aren't paying attention, where it's brighter behind the subject than the light falling on the subject. And we can see that very clearly here. The subjects are standing underneath the shade of a tree, and a lot of times we say, hey, stand in the shade of the tree. That's a great place. Everybody looks good. Our eyes compensate for that, though, and we don't really notice how bright it is. The camera, on the other hand, doesn't have that compensation feature built in. We have to tell it what to do. So it sees the bright background, exposes for that, which in essence underexposes our subjects. So we've got to overcome that, and we'll talk about that later. Here's another situation where the light is coming from behind these subjects that are walking through a tunnel going down. This is at Angel Stadium. And the light source, the sun, is setting behind them, creating sort of this like glowing effect. And it can be used and be very effective for us at times. So those are our three main directions that we're going to look at today: front, side, and backlighting. And it's something that we need to be thinking about and recognizing. You don't want to just pick your camera up and start shooting as a photographer. As you want to progress as a photographer, you need to start noticing these things, looking for them. And so what I tell my students is to start looking at the light. Start recognizing when you're talking to someone, what direction is the light coming from? There's also something called the quality of light, and there's 4 different qualities that we're going to talk about. The first is bright. Just bright light. You're outside in the middle of the day and it is bright. And so, or you're inside where there's a lot of illumination. On this day there wasn't a lot of shadows, but it was bright. So we've got the kids in this little cutout here, and that's our great example of bright light. Our next example, obviously, if you have bright light, is you're going to have, if we can go to the next slide here, you're going to have dim light. There we go, dim light. So a much shallower depth of field because there's less light. The camera had to somehow get more light in. That's another webinar for you on shutter speeds and f-stops. Here's our example of harsh light, which is basically can be achieved by just the sun shining in somebody's face. Or have you ever seen that look where we get the direct flash? I'm going to actually go back here for 1 second. The direct flash onto someone's face where you get that harsh shadow. See the line of shadows here? I'm going to show you with my mouse here. The shadow right here. We get those harsh, very defined shadows that we see that you have to be careful at times, but sometimes it can be used very effectively. And our last one that we saw here a minute ago is soft light. Very even, very almost non-detectable shadows. We can see the shadow up by our arm that's made by our arm, but very even lighting. So we have bright and dim, harsh and soft. Those different qualities of light that you need to be aware of. So there's a lot of things obviously to think about, but as you recognize these things, it's only going to make your photography and your photos better as you start to recognize these things. Give yourself the assignment of identifying different kinds of light. Then put your subject in it, and you'll be able to create some great images. I've got a question for you. Have you ever taken a great photo and you're just like, wow, everyone wants to look at it and tell you how good you are and how you should do this for a living, and then you go out to do it again and you can't reproduce it? Well, part of that is being unable to recognize the various types of light, the direction and the quality that happened when you took that photo. And now that you see this and you can recognize it and you're teaching yourself to do that, you'll be able to accomplish that much easier. So one of the majority of photos that you're going to turn your camera at is people. We love to take pictures of our loved ones, of pretty girls, of good-looking guys. So what's the best light as an amateur photographer to photograph in? Not all of us have the ability or accessibility to studio lighting or wouldn't even know how to use it. Well, what about just good old free light out there? Well, one of the best lights out there is called open shade. And where does open shade happen? In the shade. So we need to look for it. Here's the shade of a tree. But notice, unlike that first picture of the 2 girls that was silhouetted, we have enough light falling on the subject so the subject is for the most part brighter than the background. We've got that tree in the background. We do have some little hot spots, but for the most part the camera saw the face of our subject and exposed for that. And this open shade is very flattering, very soft shadows. Wrinkles don't show up, although this baby doesn't have to worry about that. But as people get older, they're not really wanting their wrinkles to show unless you're from National Geographic and you're shooting the 115-year-old Chinese lady with 1,000 wrinkles on her face, or the old guy in Moscow in Georgia where they eat yogurt and they live 130 years and he's got no teeth left. You know, those people it's okay to show wrinkles on. Here, not so much. So again, open shade is the best place. I have another example for you coming up here. It just is so complementary to our people, to faces. Here's another one. This is we saw an example from this particular area. It's a foyer of a large building with a window, and the window just creates this very soft light. Now here's something that you need to remember. Even though you're in the shade, there's still light there, and it has a direction to it and a quality to it, just like we learned before. So the direction of this light would be from camera right as it comes across from that bank of windows, and it's let me just ask you, is it soft or harsh? Well, this is very soft light, and it would fall. It's bright, but it's not quite dim. Somewhere in the middle. There's obviously degrees of the quality of light. So, but it's very nice, very beautiful light. Our subject has a slight shadow on camera left side of her face, but we can see into that shadow. She doesn't have many wrinkles or lines to speak of, but it's very complimentary. Let's move on to our next slide here. It's another example of our open shade. One other little tip here that while we're waiting for the slide to change is that a dead giveaway for lighting, let's go back to that slide, I want to point this out, is to look in the eyes of your subject. And you see how the iris reflects anything that's bright, specular highlights they're called. Well, it's reflecting the light source. If you look at it here, let me get my mouse out here if I can. You can see this reflection, which is one of the large windows, and here these are some of the windows that are further away. But the brightest light source is this one here because it's the whitest white. And you can see it over here too. That is a great giveaway to looking at where the light is coming from. That was used to illuminate the model. A great way to go check this out is like go to the makeup counter at the department store, and they have those giant pictures of their models wearing the makeup and looking all cool. Look in their eyes, and you can see the studio type lighting that they used reflected in their eyes. Here's another example of open shade. We have our light source coming from camera left, washing across our model from left to right. She has a slight shadow on the camera right side of her face where the illumination is coming here and coming across. Very soft, very complimentary to our model, and regardless of their age, this would be great light to put anyone in. So the next time you're looking to photograph someone, see if you can put them in that light. Here's our last example of open shade. Of course, my models were all under the age of 20, which is helpful when you're trying not to show lines in people's faces, but the principles work for everyone. So in this example, we were under the overhang of a building, the entrance to a building, and you can see the brick behind her, and the light's very complementary. Let's look in her eyes. We see the specular highlight right dead center in the middle of her eyes, and we've got very bright illumination, but it's also soft light coming across. Open shade tends to be soft because there's not the harshness that you get with direct light. And again, very complementary. Now we're going to move on to composition, something that's very important. If you've been noticing that the subjects aren't always dead center. Well, dead center in a photograph is basically death to your photograph for the most part. It's boring. Our eyes don't like to see it. Yes, there's exceptions to the rules, but for the most part, our eyes are drawn to certain areas within the photograph, and we're going to talk about that right now. A lot of you have heard of something called the rule of thirds, and that's why I have these lines here carved into the this photo, and we've carved it into thirds, you know, not exactly, but close enough. So we carve it into thirds both horizontally, there's the top, middle, and bottom third, and also vertically. Here's our left, center, and right areas. Where these lines meet, these areas of convergence I call them, that is where your eye of the viewer naturally tends to go. If you want your viewer to look at your photo, you need to arrange the elements of your photo within those areas as close as possible. Not exactly, but as close as possible to make it interesting. Now, there are exceptions to that where you would put someone and show symmetry or something like that, but that is a very small exception amount of time for that. So again, look at this. We have the picture of this little girl against a yellow wall, and she's got a yellow skirt on. There's some yellow in the flowers on her shirt. It's all complementary. But when we look at it here, I've got her head near that area of convergence, and actually her eye is dead on in that area of convergence. Her body is also in the left vertical third, which just makes this a very, very strongly composed photo that you would want to look at this. And that's the goal of, I think, every photographer, to have people look at their photo for as long as possible, to enjoy it, to convey a message, anything like that. Here's another one of a little boy. I haven't put the lines in, but let's look at this. If you carved those lines in there, both vertically and horizontally, you would notice that his eyes fall in the convergence of both the upper left and upper right areas of those thirds. And you were drawn to those. You have to look at those eyes. Yeah, look at this cute little boy. He's got this little pouty look on his face. But it's as a photographer, I did that on purpose to draw the viewer's eyes to his eyes. Notice how I chopped off the top of his head. We're going to talk about that later on a little bit. But you don't always have to show the whole entire body, but you emphasize those things that you want to emphasize as the photographer, as the artist. And don't forget that. You're in control. Now, there's also a rule for landscapes when you're photographing them. Some people just love to photograph landscapes, and this is a shot of Half Dome in Yosemite, taken from Glacier Point, which is across the way, just one of the most beautiful places on earth. And the rule there is you don't carve it into equal thirds. You take the horizon and put it in a third spot, either 1/3 or 2/3. So whatever you want to emphasize. Here I'm emphasizing the land. So I've got 2/3 of the land showing with only 1/3 of the sky. So it's most important that you put the horizon in on that line. That is the killer of all killers here. And so before we move on to that next slide here, that was like a little preview. You can also, if I wanted to emphasize the sky, I can move that around and put 2/3 sky in and 1/3 land. So that's those tips right there for composition are just huge. If you can get those two basic concepts down, your photography will grow by leaps and bounds. This landscape rule also equates to buildings. You can think of buildings as landscapes, trees as landscapes. So you put 2/3, 1/3, 1/3 sky, 2/3 ground. And it doesn't have to be just thirds. It just needs to get away from half and 40%. If you really want to emphasize the sky or the ground, do 7/8 sky or 7/8 ground. It's the sky's the limit, no pun intended there, to make your photography better. And the great thing is when you start combining, say for instance you have a person outside and you put the horizon in the 1/3, and then you put their eyes or some part of their body in the third, and you've got both of those things going for your compositional elements, it's only going to make your photos stronger, make people want to look at them longer, and it's going to make you a better photographer. And that's basically what we're doing. Now the third point that we want to look at today for becoming a better photographer is how to capture moments. The famous photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson was the father of modern-day photojournalism, and one of the phrases that he is credited with coining was the decisive moment. He said, whatever scene you're watching, whatever scene you're looking at, there's a decisive moment. It's made up of thousands or hundreds of moments, and there's a couple moments in there that really tell the whole story, and he believed there was one decisive moment that wrapped up and in one succinct little summary of exactly what's going on. So when you photograph something and someone yells out, say cheese, you should give them a dirty look, because that is not what we're trying to capture, the posed, frozen smile of somebody. You're trying to capture life. We're a visual storyteller with the medium of digital photography. And so this was a scene here that I was capturing for another book that I'm writing that'll be coming out. And we had a mom photographing her little son. And she was teasing him with a little toy, and she took it away. He started crying. She started laughing. And it was a great moment. I love the range of emotions here. We've got laughter and sadness. We've got happy and sad, and we've got grief, and we've got, I love how their mouths are open about the same amount, and their eyes are closed in the same way, but we've got the huge spectrum of emotions here. So that's what we're looking for. I also have, if you notice, the great composition with both of their heads in the upper left and upper right areas of convergence. Their bodies are in the left and right vertical. We've got a lot of things going on here. We've got nice soft lighting coming from a bank of windows that is camera left. So we've got a lot of things going on here. But you need to be looking. You're almost detached as a photographer as you're observing what's going on at any one moment as you're picking up the camera. So let's get away from cheese and let's start capturing moments. And to have the mindset to be ready to click. Now, before they started crying, here was another one here. She was just getting in close and taking pictures, and he just happened to slap his head. It reminded me of that commercial that says I could have had a V8. And so I snapped the shutter speed here. We're waiting for those great moments. You see photographers with the camera to their face for long times. It's because they're waiting for a moment. They're not just saying, okay, say cheese, stand against the wall, whatever. They're looking to capture life. And these are, you can't fake these moments. They look posed, they look awkward. This was not fake. This was real, as was the slide beforehand. So that's something to think about the next time you're just pulling out your camera to photograph life. Now, one thing you need to learn about capturing moments is anticipation and preparation. The anticipation, and a great example is shooting a tennis match. Everyone has seen, you know, when they're covering Wimbledon or the U.S. Open, and you've got the racket and the tight shot with the ball and all that, and you're like, wow, that looks, you know, it's pretty cool and should be easy to do. It's not. The ball, it moves so fast off that racket. Remember, they serve at 120, 140 miles an hour that if you see it in the camera viewfinder, you've missed it. Here's a great example of that. The subject has hit the ball and it's gone. It's not in the frame, and you've got nothing. So without the ball, you don't have a great picture. So what we need to do, and here's another example. We've missed it. There's the shadow of the ball. It's already gone. You know, sometimes we have winders and motor drives on our cameras, but it's best to anticipate and shoot before you think something's going to happen, and you'll find that you'll get a greater, higher percentage of great moments rather than missed moments. Here it is before she's even beginning to hit it. Another great example of this is the sport of boxing, where I've talked to a lot of other photographers and myself included. If you wait to try and capture the guy punching, you're just never going to get it. It was always anticipation. They punch so fast, the other guy doesn't even know what's going on. Well, the same thing with the photos of that. You get this sense of when they're going to punch, and you shoot. It's anticipation and learning to know what it is that you're shooting. And here we have the shot of the ball actually leaving the racket. because I prepared. We've also got her head near that upper right area of convergence, the ball in the lower left area of convergence. We have some, what I like to call diagonality. I'm just making up words here. But if you go back and forth, a viewer's eye first goes to the ball, then goes up the racket, up the arms, to the subject's face, and then back down. And that's a great compositional element to keep your viewer interested and in the photo and to keep looking at it. Now let's turn our attention to capturing moments during events. And this was at one of our friends' son's first birthday party. And those of us in America know, so what's the tradition? We don't have a lot of traditions. One of them is when you turn one, they put your birthday cake in front of you and you get to smash it all over yourself, and probably that's why we have so much problem with obese people and sugar and all that stuff. And it's all goes back to the first birthday party tradition. But so do we want a nice picture of him saying cheese and smiling at us? No, we want his face full of cake and all the stuff that's going on, and so that's what I waited for here. I was anticipating this, waiting for it. We've got nice lighting coming from camera left, coming across from a big window, and we've got him digging into the cake, and you've got this great moment, and that's what it's all about. We want to document those events. We also want to document everyday life. We want to capture everyday life. This is a great photo of a mom and her little boy. This is my little boy. So I knew that he loved to be driven around in his little wagon, and he would make you sit in it. And I guess he thought he was driving it or something. I don't know. But I was ready. Now, is it a perfect picture? It's not a perfect picture. I wish that the playpen was not in the background, but it's there. It's my life, and that I recorded. This is a memory. They say your house is on fire. Where are you going to go? I'm going to go and I'm going to grab my hard drive and run out with all my pictures, because this is a special memory of my oldest son when he was growing up. This is the things that he wanted to do, and my wife. We've got their heads in the area of convergence of the left and right. The wagon is near the lower horizontal third, and we've just got a lot of things going on. Their bodies are in the left and right verticals. There's a lot of things going for this. We've got a great moment when we've got this huge smile on his face. He was just so excited at this time. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking to capture everyday life and everyday moments. These are my dogs, and they are brutal. They would jump this was their game. Who's ever left in the pool gets jumped on. And so I just moved to the far end. I knew he was going to do it, waited. The black dog obligingly jumped in, and the yellow dog said, ha-ha, and jumped on her head. No animals were hurt during the making of this photo, by the way. The only thing that was hurt was the inflatable back there, which they used to ride on. They eventually popped it. So I was ready. And in the heat of the moment, I had my camera ready, preset, and he's the one dog's kind of his body's in that vertical, upper vertical third. He's sort of in that area of convergence. He's moving down to the lower left area of convergence, and there's that diagonality going on between the black dog and the yellow dog. And what we get is a great moment that kind of sums up this point of my dog's life, of our life in our backyard. And that, when you get down to it, is exactly what we're looking for. Now let's turn our attention to people photography. This is point number 4, and how to make people photography even better. One thing that we do is, we get stuck photographing the entire head of a person, the entire body of a person. We're too far away. We want to be more effective. We want to, even though this is a great picture, a great moment, he's mugging for the camera, but compositionally, it's sort of center focused. It doesn't really have, nothing's really in those areas of convergence. And so what needs to happen here sometimes is it's okay to chop the top of their head off in photography, right? That's the only time. We don't do that in reality. We do it in photography. So by cropping in tighter, we're able to put the eyes in the area of convergence. We've got his hands in the left and right verticals, and we get closer. We get that intimacy in photography that you just can't get that from anything else. So getting closer is a great way to help yourself compositionally and to get more intimate with the subject to record them. This is the model here. We put it would be her left eye, but camera right eye in the area of convergence, the upper right area of convergence. And look how much stronger this is than if I would backed up and shot her whole head, which we know her head, the top of her head's there. We just make those assumptions. And it would have moved her right eye lower, or camera right eye lower, she would have been in the middle, and it would not have been as effective of an image. So every chance you can, just get closer. Here's another example of being able to get closer. Look at the light source here. We've got very directional light at sunset coming through a window. We can see the specular highlight in her eye. We've got the shadow here going sideways, the shadow on the side of her face. We've got this red wall that's illuminated here. Just got some beautiful light going on, and we got closer to put the various elements of her face in those areas of convergence and the right vertical to make it that much stronger of a photo. So that's a great tip. Another great tip is patience. We need to learn patience. I have friends that back at the newspaper that I used to work for that would wait for hours for a great picture. You know, we would go on these travel stories with our travel editor, and he gave us the ability to wait as long as we needed to get the picture, because he knew the better the picture, people are going to look at it longer and enter in the story that much more. Here's a picture of these kids, and I suggested they give their brother, their sibling, a kiss, and he gave the reaction that most 7 or 8-year-old boys are going to give. And it was just patience and waiting for that moment. Here's another one, just waiting. These kids, we did a story on sunglasses for kids and how they were getting popular, and UV and protecting their eyes and things like that. And most of the kids just didn't really want to pose. They're 3 or 4 years old, and they're not going to pose for you. So patience. You put a long lens on, you put them in a confined space, and they start showing off, just like this one did here. Got her eye near the area of upper right convergence. Her body's in the right vertical convergence. We have a nice clean background. She really pops out. It was all patience and waiting, 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 waiting. That's kind of the name of the game for photography. One last area that I want to talk to help you take better people photos are props. This was a senior portrait that we were doing, and we've seen a picture of her earlier here. And you give someone a prop who's normally sort of self-conscious of having their picture taken. They're not a model. They're not used to it. And all of a sudden, they're transported to another place. I told her to think about, she's a songwriter, to think about some of the songs that she's written. And we didn't have to show the whole guitar. We just showed part of it, used it as kind of a compositional element. Her head is in the area of convergence. Her body's in the left vertical. The guitar isn't quite, but it works. It just gave her something to concentrate on. One last little tip here as we move through the props is that when you're photographing a person, the eyes, whether they're looking at you or looking away, looking at you, they're very confrontive. And it's harder to enter into the emotions of that person and look at that person versus when they're looking away, as this subject is. She's looking away. It's easier to enter in, to look at it longer. It's not as confrontive. So any of you out there that are easily intimidated, you can photograph your people looking away from you, and you'll have much more success. But here's another picture with props. This baby here was one of the most photographable babies I've ever taken pictures of. And he started to lose a little bit of interest in it, so we stuck him in his little toy thing, and he just went crazy. He just loved it. Props, 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 props. I cannot say it enough how great they are for the photographer and for the subject to kind of forget that they're being photographed. Reality shows are really big right now, and people think, wow, did they really do that in front of the camera? Well, a lot of times you just forget the cameras are there. You wear the subject down. And that's probably one of the greatest traits to learn as a photographer, is to wear your subject down. Just make them feel at ease, chat them up, talk to them, get them excited. And obviously they have to stop talking while you're taking pictures, you get their mouth open. But just to make them feel more at ease. Here's another prop. This was another senior photo. It was an authentic Hawaiian lei that they had bought, and it smelled incredible. We found this spot that reminded me of Hawaii. This weird-looking tree back there that looked sort of lush and tropical. She just put this lei on, and it kind of transformed her back to the islands. We've got her head near the area of the upper right convergence. Her body's in that right vertical, and the prop just helps us. Just helps us. Now, this brings us to, we've got one last prop here. We went into we were at the fair, and there was a butterfly exhibit, and the butterflies would land on you, and the kids loved it. And so here we've got some very nice soft light. We can't even see any shadows coming across. So let's look at the light here in the eyes. You can see that it was like a tent, a mesh tent with an opaque cover on the top, one of those pop-ups, but it had netting so that the butterflies couldn't take off. But we've got this beautiful light coming across from camera right to camera left. See how it's a little bit brighter here than it is over here. We're starting to get a tiny bit of shadows. We've got the prop of the butterfly and the slight smile. I just love this picture. And props make the day for you. Okay, now this brings us to our last point, point 5 of our 5 tips for digital photography today. Point of view, something I'll call POV. Point of view basically means when the viewer looks at it, where are they looking from? Where was the camera? Was it high? Was it low? Was it in the middle? If you look through, this is something that most people never think about, but as you flip through a magazine and you look at where they put the position of the camera, it makes us think and feel certain things. Here's the Eiffel Tower shot from very low, looking up to make you look like you are an ant. Look at the man down in the very left-hand corner. So small. This thing is incredibly large, especially in person. So you get this point of view, and you need to think about where you're going to put the camera. In this, it was a rainy day, and I was trying to just the sort of those emotions that go along with a rainy day in the fall. And we have the leaf in the area of convergence, the upper right-hand area of convergence. We have a lot of negative space around the leaf that kind of supports it. But the camera is not quite on the ground, but it's very low. We're like from a toddler's point of view, sort of the young looking at the old. And you can read into it quite a bit, as much as you do or don't want, but it's important to think of that as, like I said before, the visual storyteller. Here's another point of view photo, just kind of street level, looking up. To live in this part of Paris, I thought would be very interesting. It's very easy to just show straight-on pictures of the Eiffel Tower, and it was breaking up because of the light, and it was almost sort of like just a shape. And I loved just the thought of waking up, walking on the streets of Paris, if this is where you lived, how it would sort of become commonplace, but it isn't. It's one of the most recognizable structures in the world. So my point of view was just from the street looking up. Those kind of things, you look at that, you think about that, it changes how you approach your photography as you're thinking more and more and more and leaving less and less to chance. Here's a very famous fountain in the Plaza de Concorde in Paris, and a night shot. We've got Poseidon, or whoever that is, in the right area of lower area of convergence, and conveniently the water shooting up the vertical right. And we've just got a lot of things going on here, but we're very low. I wanted to show the grandeur of it. It's just this huge, and I think it's got gold all over it, or it's gold paint, I don't know, but it was very rich looking. And so that's something that we need to consider. It helps our photography. The same thing, getting with point of view, is angles. Where do you put the camera? Here I wanted to emphasize the height of these sequoia trees. And so we've got the kids' feet in that area of convergence, and we just shot low. Now, where's the light coming from? It was a cloudy day, and so the light, if you look at it, is coming from straight up. Look at the face of the smallest boy, and he's tilted his head back. The light's hitting him straight on. The other kids have their heads bent down, and the light's hitting the top of their head, but not quite their face, just their noses and part of their cheeks. So very soft light, a low angle, emphasizes the height of the trees and how small the kids are. All something I thought of as the photographer. Here's, that's probably the same day, the sun came out, and they have this line in Sequoia of how big it is, how big the Sequoia tree is, and so you can walk and see how high it is. And so we had the boy lay down and just, is it composed perfect? No, we've got the little plaque near the area of convergence. We've got the line going up to the top area of convergence, and we got the boy on the line. So we have that diagonal thing that I was talking about. And we just have an interesting angle, sort of shot from above down, and because people don't normally lay on the ground. And again, a visual record of this family's vacation in their life, something to treasure, something to store and keep for later generations to document your life. Here's another way that we can contrast our point of view would be contrast the size of the subject with whatever else we're doing. Here was a sequoia tree that had fallen over. These are, I guess, the roots. And it's gigantic. It's ginormous. And look at the little kids down there. This thing is probably, the tallest kid is over 5 feet there, so it's maybe 15, 20 feet high. It's just incredibly large. And so it gives that contrast of size that gives us some context of what's going on. If there's no people in that shot, you'd have no idea. So one of the last things I wanted to point out in this point of view was that we don't always have to have that normal view of you standing up. You have knees, bend them, get low, get up higher. Also, another way is get in closer. If you have the ability to have a macro type close-in lens on your or feature on your camera, get close. Get close. These are two yucca fronds that I found on a rainy day, and just kind of focused in on those. For a different world, I don't know if you've ever seen those What Is It, where they come in super, super close on something that's like a nail or something like that, and you have to guess what it is. Well, this is that kind of thing. Getting closer all falls under that point of view. So just to review that, where do you put your camera and why? You have to think about angles, and sometimes we need to contrast the size of our image, and lastly, get closer. Get super close, get macro close to create some thoughtfulness for your viewer. Final thoughts of this, I just want to go over these really quick as we have a statue of Rodin's thinker, pun intended. We went over our 5 main tips for digital photography today, the first one being light. And how we need to recognize that. We need to recognize there's a directionality to it. There's a quality of light. What type of light is the best light to photograph people in? We also have to worry about composition. That's our second tip, our second point. And how we place objects or subjects within the canvas of the photograph, and how that strengthens or weakens the photo itself for people to look at it. There's a rule of thirds. There's also rules for landscapes. Our third point was capturing moments, and the decisive moment that Henri Cartier-Bresson came up with, coined the phrase of decisive moment, and how there's a decisive moment in every event that we go to. So we need to learn to capture that. How do we do that? By anticipating, by putting ourselves in the right place for that, by preparing and kind of knowing as much as we can and being ready to capture that. In events that we go to, birthday parties, just life. Birthday parties, get-togethers, our kids going through various things in their lives, the different stages, weddings, Even funerals now, people are asking people to bring their cameras. We've become such a recording kind of society, and we need to think about and consider and prepare to capture those moments. Our fourth point is people photography, and tips for doing that, one of them was to get closer, to come in, to create the elements and put the elements and compose them in a stronger way so that people will look at our photos and it's not just the head of a person dead center in the frame. Also, we need to have patience as we wait and watch, to be an observer of life and to document it, not just so willy-nilly and hoping that things will happen in front of us, but to actually think about it and consider it. Lastly, in that area is props, and how great they work for our subjects as they take their mind off being photographed and just enter in to whatever it is with the prop and just kind of lose themselves with it. Finally, we have our point of view of where you put the camera, why I put it there, what I'm trying to do. Am I trying to look up and make this grandiose? Am I looking down on something? Am I equal with a certain part to emphasize that? What angles am I considering, low, high, from the side? Also contrast in subject size. And finally, close-up versus a normal view, getting so close that we get intimate with it. So that is our package today. We thank you so much for joining us. We hope that these little thoughts and these tips will make you a better photographer immediately. Take the time to give yourself little assignments to accomplish each one of these points that I've talked about today, and you will see immediate results that will take you to that next level of your photography. So again, thank you, and happy shooting.